The church doors burst open violently as Madame Beatrice entered in her full, terrifying form. Her body looked larger now, covered completely in dark fur with burning yellow eyes. Church members screamed and ran in every direction. When 14-year-old Amara left her village, everybody believed her life was about to change. Her widowed mother cried with joy after Madame Beatrice promised to send the girl to a good school in Port Harcourt. She will become a great woman, Madame Beatrice said with a warm smile. Amara held a small bag containing 2 dresses and an old Bible. She imagined herself wearing neat uniforms and speaking big English in a classroom. But the moment they arrived at the large mansion, the smile on Madame Beatrice's face disappeared. She pointed toward the kitchen. "Wake up by 4 every morning," she said coldly. "This house must shine." Amara quickly realized she had been deceived. Instead of going to school, she spent every day washing clothes, scrubbing floors, and cooking heavy meals for Madame Beatrice and her son, Kelvin. The woman shouted whenever she noticed dust anywhere. Sometimes she slapped Amara for small mistakes. Kelvin behaved strangely too. He barely spoke and always avoided eye contact. At night, Amara slept on a thin mat beside the kitchen door while mosquitoes filled the air. Whenever she asked about school, Madame Beatrice became angry. "Do you think education is free?" she snapped. Weeks turned into months, and Amara slowly lost hope of ever escaping the house alive. One evening, while preparing dinner, Amara noticed something unusual. Madame Beatrice locked herself inside a small room upstairs every night, exactly at 11 o'clock. Nobody was allowed near the room. "If I ever catch you there, you will regret it," she warned. The woman also hated mirrors. Every mirror inside the mansion remained covered with red cloth. Amara found that strange because rich people usually loved beautiful decorations. Sometimes deep growling sounds came from upstairs after midnight. Kelvin always looked terrified whenever the sounds began. One rainy night, Amara gathered courage and asked him softly, "What is inside that room?" Kelvin's hand started shaking immediately. Kelvin looked around nervously before speaking. "Don't ask questions in this house," he whispered. His voice trembled like somebody afraid of dying. Amara noticed fresh scratches on his arms. Before she could ask more questions, Madame Beatrice suddenly appeared behind them. Her eyes looked unusually red for a moment before returning to normal. "Kelvin, go to your room," she ordered. The boy ran upstairs immediately. Madame Beatrice moved closer to Amara until their faces almost touched. "Curiosity can destroy a person," she said quietly. That night, Amara could not sleep. Around midnight, she heard heavy footsteps moving across the ceiling, like a giant animal crawling slowly above her head. The following night, Amara stayed awake again. Around midnight, the strange sounds returned. This time, they were louder. She heard growling, furniture breaking, and something heavy hitting the walls upstairs. Fear covered her body, but curiosity pushed her forward. Slowly, she climbed the staircase barefoot. The upstairs corridor was dark, except for a faint red light escaping from beneath Madame Beatrice's locked door. Amara moved closer and suddenly heard a painful scream. It sounded human. Her heart pounded heavily as she bent down near the keyhole. What she saw made her blood freeze instantly. Madame Beatrice was no longer fully human inside the room. Amara covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Madame Beatrice's body had transformed into something terrifying. Thick, dark fur covered her skin, while her fingers stretched into long claws. Her eyes glowed bright yellow like fire inside darkness. The creature moved wildly across the room, knocking chairs aside. Bones cracked loudly as her body twisted unnaturally. Amara stepped back in horror and accidentally kicked a flower vase in the hallway. The vase shattered loudly on the floor. Instantly, the growling inside stopped. Silence filled the mansion. Then, Amara heard slow footsteps approaching the door. Her entire body trembled as the doorknob slowly began turning. Before the door fully opened, Kelvin suddenly grabbed Amara's hand and dragged her downstairs. Both of them hid inside the storeroom while heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor above. Amara could barely breathe. "You saw her, didn't you?" Kelvin whispered fearfully. Tears filled his eyes. He explained that Madame Beatrice was not completely human. Years ago, his father disappeared mysteriously after discovering her secret. Since then, strange things kept happening inside the house. Kelvin confessed he had tried running away before, but Madame Beatrice always found him. "She changes after midnight," he whispered. "And when she's hungry, somebody always suffers." Suddenly, loud growling echoed downstairs again. The next morning, the gateman was nowhere to be found. Madame Beatrice acted normal during breakfast, calmly sipping tea as if nothing happened overnight. But Amara noticed bloodstains beneath the woman's fingernails. Kelvin avoided looking at his mother completely. Around noon, police officers arrived, asking questions about the missing gateman. Madame Beatrice smiled sweetly and claimed the man had stolen money before escaping. The officers believed her immediately because she was respected in the neighborhood. As they left, Amara noticed something terrifying. One officer stared strangely at Madame Beatrice, almost like he feared her. Then he quickly entered the police van without saying another word. While Madame Beatrice attended a business meeting, Amara finally entered the forbidden room upstairs. The smell inside almost made her vomit. Strange symbols covered the walls in red paint. Animal bones hung from the ceiling beside black candles. In one corner stood several old photographs of missing workers who once served inside the mansion. Amara's hands shook badly when she recognized the gateman's face among them. Then, she discovered a small diary hidden beneath the bed. The diary belonged to Kelvin's father. Inside, he described Madame Beatrice as a shape-shifting spirit feeding on human fear. Suddenly, Amara heard the front gate opening downstairs much earlier than expected. Amara quickly tried hiding the diary, but Madame Beatrice's voice echoed from downstairs. "Amara!" she called slowly. Fear rushed through the girl's body. Heavy footsteps climbed the staircase, one after another. Amara looked around desperately before hiding behind a wardrobe. Madame Beatrice entered the room quietly. For several seconds, silence filled the air. Then the woman sniffed deeply, like a hunting animal. "I can smell fear," she whispered. Slowly, she walked toward the wardrobe. Amara held her breath tightly. Just before Madame Beatrice reached her hiding place, Kelvin suddenly shouted from downstairs that visitors had arrived. The woman paused briefly before leaving the room again. Amara and Kelvin ran into the dark street as Madame Beatrice chased them with terrifying speed. Her glowing eyes pierced through the heavy rain, while her claws scratched walls and cars along the road. Dogs barked wildly as people rushed indoors in fear. Kelvin led Amara toward an old church nearby. She hates holy places, he shouted while running. Madame Beatrice leaped onto a packed car like a wild animal and roared loudly. Amara nearly slipped on the wet road, but Kelvin pulled her up quickly. The church bell suddenly rang loudly through the night. Madame Beatrice stopped moving for a moment, growling angrily at the sound. Inside the church, an elderly pastor listened carefully as the frightened children explained everything. Surprisingly, the old man did not laugh. Instead, his face became serious. He revealed that Madame Beatrice once belonged to a secret spiritual cult many years ago. According to rumors, members sacrificed their humanity for wealth and power. But darkness always demands payment, the pastor said quietly. He opened an old Bible and began praying over the children. Outside, thunder shook the sky violently. Suddenly, church windows shattered one after another. Madame Beatrice's angry growl filled the entire building. The pastor stood slowly and faced the entrance doors without fear. The church doors burst open violently as Madame Beatrice entered in her full, terrifying form. Her body looked larger now, covered completely in dark fur with burning yellow eyes. Church members screamed and ran in every direction. The pastor continued praying loudly while holding up his Bible. Madame Beatrice roared angrily and charged toward him, but suddenly stopped near the altar like an invisible force blocked her path. Smoke rose from her skin as she screamed painfully. Kelvin grabbed Amara's hand tightly while the pastor commanded the spirit to leave the woman's body forever. The entire church shook violently before Madame Beatrice suddenly collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. Morning sunlight entered the church gently as police officers carried Madame Beatrice away in an ambulance. This time, witnesses had seen everything with their own eyes. Kelvin finally broke down crying after years of fear and silence. Amara hugged him tightly. Days later, the government discovered several missing persons connected to Madame Beatrice's mansion. The house was destroyed completely. The pastor helped Amara return to school exactly as her mother once dreamed. Kelvin moved in with relatives far away from the city. Though life slowly became peaceful again, Amara never forgot those terrifying nights inside the mansion. Sometimes, during heavy rain, she still remembered Madame Beatrice's glowing yellow eyes.